welcome back to the Soccer Ladder. Today we have Tab Ramos with us. Such an exciting episode that we have. Tab, welcome to the Soccer Ladder.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
I'm not sure if you know this, but the reason I started this podcast is my son Liam plays for Red Bulls Academy. And I just feel like there's so many questions around trying to navigate academy life and soccer life and, kids growing up trying to, climb their way up the ladder. So I started this podcast and I love to have guests like you on to share their insights and who've been on this journey. So we're excited to have you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think it's a good fit. I think you're doing, let's say, a noble cause here because there are a lot of questions out there, and in particular, parents have to navigate through this very confusing youth development. I guess we call it ladder because we're in the Soccer Ladder podcast. So, but it's very difficult for parents, and it's good that you have this, and hopefully, a lot of questions come up and a lot of questions get answered.
Awesome. Well, first of all, let me just say, I'm sure everyone knows your background, but your background is so impressive. Let me just first start by saying some of your accolades. So you were the first MLS player. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You played in 3 World Cups. Amazing. You played in Europe. You played at, was it Metro Stars back then or was it Red Bulls?
It was Metro Stars before Red Bulls.
Okay. Yep. Okay. You've been a coach. You coach the U.S. U20 team. Is that correct?
I coached the under-20 team in 4 World Cups. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh my God. Such an impressive background, Tab. So real quick. So Tab and I met in Madrid. We were both there for Real Madrid and Abbott. So what an experience that was, the Abbott Dream Team. What do you think of what's going on with that?
Yeah, it was great. I was there obviously to support my son Alex, who works directly with Abbott as you do, and it was a great experience. I think obviously we got to experience while at Real Madrid. I think an experience that I think most people can have, right? And I feel really lucky that way because we got to live the behind the scenes. We got to go in the locker room right before the game, which really no one can. We got to live a couple days in their facility. And by live, I mean being there full days, exploring all of it. And I think it's great to see. Obviously, Real Madrid is one, if not the best biggest club in the world, and having that experience, it's a good experience to have to be able to discuss and to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, it was truly one of a kind. And for those kids that are trying out for the Abbott Dream Team, good luck, and it's going to be amazing. I love that. Okay, so let's get started with some questions. You came to the U.S. from Uruguay at a young age. How much did that early experience shape your mentality as a player?
That's a great question, and I think a lot it had to do with a lot of the in particular because you ask it this way, how much it shaped my mentality. And Uruguay is one of those countries where soccer is really the only sport that that kids care about. Of course, there's other sports, but I think that's the one that everybody wants to play. And, everyone wants to be a pro soccer player. And soccer there is hard. You always play you always play to win. You start playing to win from when you're 6 years old. And by the time you're 11 or 12, you sort of get on your professional pathway because that's sort of where your career is supposed to start. So I think the hardness of living there every day, of playing games, playing must-win games already from 7 and 8 years old, I think builds you to be this sort of this hard sort of athlete that just doesn't want to lose because you learn to not want to lose, and I think it's helpful. And anytime that you play, I think that way you give maximum effort, and when you give maximum effort, you learn the most.
Yeah, for sure. Looking back, what do you think made your generation of U.S. players mentally tough?
Well, I was very fortunate to be around a generation that I could call the pillars of what soccer is today. Guys like Tony Meola and Eric Winalda and John Harkes and Marcelo Balboa and Paul Caligiuri. I think these are the guys that kind of got soccer through that late 80s dull where we had nothing going on into a World Cup in 1990 and then sort of built the game for by 1994 we were already a respectable world national team that can compete pretty much against any team. And I think that was built on the backs of a generation of guys. And I'm only giving credit to, 4 or 5 or 6, but a lot more people deserve credit than obviously just the players.
Yeah, yeah. What's the biggest difference between youth soccer development when you were growing up versus now?
Well, the biggest difference, I would say, it was much less confusing. So when you played, you just played normally for your town club. And, if you were really good at your town club, you'd go to a state team tryout. Your coach would send your top 3 or 4 guys. And if you made the state team, then you competed for New Jersey against the other states, and in our case, Region 1, which is Maine all the way down to Virginia. So you'd compete in the regional tournament with your state, and if you were good enough, you'd get invited to a national camp. If you not only did you do well with New Jersey, but also were you a good enough player to be considered for the national team, and then you'd get invited to national camp. So there was a very clear process in terms of who the best players were and how you were going to get to the national team if that's where you were going.
It's definitely a whole new landscape now. Very confusing. A lot of young players today focus heavily on private training. How important is creativity, pickup soccer, and just playing freely?
Well, I think all of that is important. Players focus on private training because it's the one thing that their parents can take them to, and it's really the only way that parents can help their children. We live in a society in this country where most players come from the suburbs, and they can't necessarily go out on the street and play because other kids on their street don't play. And so parents find themselves with a dilemma of, okay, do I pay for someone to train them individually because there's nothing else that I have to give them extra? I see my kid comes home and he wants to kick the ball in the backyard, and that's what he's doing, and that's great. But parents find themselves trying to figure out how they're going to help their child, and normally that's really the only way. But along those lines, as you're mentioning, small-sided games and all the other things, they're all important. I wish there was a place on Tuesdays and Friday nights that all the kids could just go for free, and hundreds of kids were there, and you played. Winner stayed on. And you just played, no rules. They make their own rules. That's sort of how I grew up, and I think it had a value.
Your answer made me think of this, and I know it's a hot topic. What are your thoughts on pay to play here in America?
Well, pay to play is a difficult subject, but one that gets brought up a lot more than it should, because pay to play is just not going to go away. If you're going to want your child to play on a team where they have a proper coach, it's really no different than when you take your daughter to horseback riding, or your son to play the piano. I mean, you're taking your child to an expert who has to teach. And for that expert has to get paid. They have an education in what they're teaching. So that's not going to go away. Now, I'll take the other side of it, which is the bigger one. I think soccer has become a business. And that's a tough thing, because now you're forced not only to play on a team where you have to pay the coach, but now also you're forced to go to all of these tournaments that cost all of this money, and you have to travel across the country sometimes to play teams that are no better than your town next over. And so I think it's become a huge business. And by the way, you're obligated to do those things to stay in certain leagues, or to get more points, or to be ranked. Or
Yeah.
there's all of these things that cost the parents a lot of money. And I think all of those things can and should go away, but I don't think they ever will.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Hi, Tab. I have some questions for you. For players 12 to 15 specifically, what should they really be focusing on right now?
Hi, Liam. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I have to tell you, at that age, I think it continues to be not only what you do with your team. So let's say you're training 4 days a week or 3 days a week with your team at that age. I think what's important is what you do outside of that time. Because you have to remember, when you're at that age, you're already thinking, probably in your mind, that you're in some sort of professional pathway. But so if that's the case, then your competition is not just your teammates that you're seeing 4 days a week. Your competition is the kids in Africa who play every day, the kids in South America who play every day. And so how are you going to match those hours? And unfortunately, those hours you have to do on your own.
Love that. That's great advice. Parents in elite youth soccer often worry about rankings, showcases, and exposure. What do you wish more parents understood about long-term development?
Well, I think that it takes time. There are kids who develop late. There are some that develop early. There's no question that most of the great players already start developing at 8 and 9 years old. You can see it, and players can already be great by the time they're 12. That's what I've noticed. Now, there are some late developers. There are some ones that come later on, and there are some great professional players who have had 10, 12-year professional careers who were not very good, let's just say, until they were 16 or 17. That happens also. The professional game is very physical. And so that part of it is one that you can gain as you get older. But the really skillful players, you can really start to see the difference by the time they're 10 to 12 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a great reminder that it could be at 12 and it could be at 16. And one thing that I feel like I've learned from this podcast is a lot of, people that have long careers is like people that focus on like nutrition and sleep and are not injured. And, it's just not the best player out there. There's a lot of factors that go into it for that, long-term career. You coached the U20 U.S. national team for years. What qualities instantly stood out when you saw future top level players?
This is a really easy answer for me, actually, because there was one quality that stood out amongst like the best that you could tell were going to be the best, and that's their mental capacity to just be hard and to want to win everything they do. So whether it's a 2v2 in practice, a 2v1 to goal, a 7v7, or the actual game, they're always playing just as hard because they actually enjoy it. They enjoy that competition of playing hard. So very easy for me to pick off guys like, Tyler Adams or, Weston McKinney, guys that I've had who were just relentless practice after practice, day after day.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Tyler Adams is one of our favorite players. We love him. Okay, this is coming from Liam.
When you watch young midfielders play today, what's something the best ones do differently?
This is a great question. What do they do different? I think there's one thing that I think most people don't take into consideration as much. And when you're talking about midfielders, I'm assuming that you are saying central midfielders. And if there's central midfielders, that is the most difficult position to play on the field because you sort of have to have eyes all around your head. There's pressure coming from everywhere at different speeds, at different times, and a number of players coming at you. And so I would say the one skill that's really key for this position is the checking your shoulder constantly looking over to see what's coming when the ball is coming to you, but really important when the ball is not around you, so that you put yourself in a space where you can receive the ball and you know exactly what's around you when the ball gets there.
With the World Cup approaching soon, what do you think success looks like for the U.S. men's national team?
Well, success to me would be a long run in this World Cup. It has to be. You can't really look at it any other way. At the end of the day, results they're what really matters. Taking into consideration that basically all of our national teams that get to the World Cup get to the round of 16, I would say that anything less than a quarterfinal run in this World Cup would be a little bit of a disappointment. And of course, you always depend on the teams you play, right? Because fortunately, we have a good group. We should get out of the group in first place, which would lead to us having around the 32 opponent that's fairly good matchup for us, which would lead us to around the 16. That also should be a pretty good matchup for us. So, if we have a good path, obviously it will be easier to get to the quarterfinals. If we don't, it'll be harder. But I think anything less than a quarterfinal run, I think we will all be a little bit disappointed.
I think so. I agree with you there. Okay, we have to talk about this real quick. You're opening, can we talk about your soccer school?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. You're opening the U.S. National Soccer School, which combines both education and high-level soccer development. It's a really unique model. What was the vision behind building an environment like that for young players?
Well, I just felt this is a project that's been coming for the last 2 years because it's obviously not easy, in particular on the academic side. We want to be able to compete with private schools. So for us to find the right partner that could provide the type of education with us that could potentially take our student athletes to an Ivy League school is not easy. And this is where we are. I think we found the right educational partner in Rise, and having done that, then I was free to now express myself in building a curriculum for soccer that would have kids trained 5 days a week. So our kids that come to our school, they come to school from 8 o'clock in the morning until 11:30. They have lunch from 11:30 to 12:30. Then they go with our high performance group for an hour, and then they have 2 hours of soccer every day. And that could be, from Mondays being all small sided, the biggest we go is 2v2, to like Wednesday where it's large sided from 7v7 to full field, to then Thursday doing positional training only. So they do positional training. So like, let's say you're a right back or a right winger, you're going to be doing a lot of crossing. You're going to be doing a lot of dribbling 1v1 before you cross. You're going to be watching video on players who play those positions. So, and then on Fridays, more of a down day where you get ready for your game on the weekend that you'll have with your club, because most kids will play on their own club as well. So we think that we can provide a great pathway, not just for college, but potentially for some kids into the pros. And this is, by the way, I've gone to the new Red Bull facility, which is amazing. I was there for the opening. And so we know that the top kids will go either into, let's say, the Red Bull Academy full time or the Philadelphia Union Academy full time. Our school was built for the student athlete who wants a little bit of both, wants to get a good education, and also wants that possibility of potentially going into Division I college or a pro down the road.
And where are you located? Where's the school located?
We're located in Hillsborough, which is about 15 minutes north of Princeton.
Okay, yeah, you're definitely like between Red Bulls and Philly Union. Well, that's exciting.
Wait, between Red Bull and Philly Union, but let's not forget that I have one alliance. This is my alliance.
Okay? We love that.
Okay.
And there's a big Red Bulls Philly Union matchup this weekend for Liam's age group. So that's a big one. So how do people learn about your school? Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. I mean, it's really going to our website, which is www.usnationalsoccerschool.com.
Okay.
So that's the best way to find it, and you get all the information there.
Amazing.
So it's usnationalsoccerschool.com.
Okay. And then let's end today with some rapid fire questions. Best player you ever played against?
Best player I ever played against, Roberto Carlos, Brazilian left back who played at Real Madrid, who we met while we were in Madrid that day.
That is so cool. Full circle moment to see him again. Best atmosphere you ever experienced?
Best atmosphere, I would have to pick two separate moments. One was in the 1990 World Cup. We played against Italy in Rome. And that was just an incredible environment. And then the second, I'd have to say the 1994 World Cup when we played Colombia at the Rose Bowl in front of about 100,000 people. That was also an incredible environment.
Insane. Oh, gosh. One coach who impacted you most?
I was very fortunate to have great coaches throughout my career that I didn't listen too much to, by the way. But the coach that impacted the most is likely Jorge D'Alessandro, a coach I had in Spain at both Real Betis and at Figueres. And he made things really easy for me.
MLS or Europe?
As far as what?
I guess let's say as a goal for a young soccer player.
Well, I think, describing Europe as general, it's quite big, and there's quite a few different leagues. But I would say in general, the goal of players is to play in the best league in the world, right? And at this point, it would be the EPL.
One thing young players need more of today.
They need to spend more time with the ball. They need to learn more about their relationship with the ball and how comfortable they are with the ball. Because at the end of the day, all of the physical training and the analytics and the metrics that can be provided by how much you run don't really mean anything if you don't have real control of the ball.
Okay, final question. One word to describe the future of U.S. soccer.
I would say hope. If I have to pick one word, I'd say hope.
I was thinking that one in my head too. Well, it was so awesome to have you on with us today. I know you're a busy person, but thank you for sharing your insights and your journey and just so many great tips for the young kids.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, it was good to see you again. Hopefully we see you down the road soon.
All right. Hopefully. Thank you, Megan.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Have a
All
good
right.
one.